The chainsaws were still running when Raymond Callahan stepped onto his lawn in his slippers. Sawdust hung in the morning air like yellow snow. A 100-year-old branch lay across his driveway, split open, the pale wood still wet and bleeding sap. Two men in orange vests were loading what was left of the trunk into a woodchipper. And standing on the other side of the fence in a white terrycloth bathrobe, holding a cup of espresso, was the man who paid for it. Raymond didn't yell, didn't curse, didn't move. He just stared at the stump, 95 years of rings cut clean through. And then, very slowly, the old seal reached down, picked up a single fallen acorn, slipped it into his shirt pocket, and walked back inside his house. The bathrobe man left. He shouldn't have. Let me tell you about a little neighborhood called Willow Creek. It sits about 20 minutes outside Charleston, South Carolina, tucked between a sleepy river and a Tulane County road most GPS systems forget exists. If you were driving through in the spring of 2019, you'd have rolled your windows down just to smell the jasmine. Magnolia Lane was the prettiest street in town. 9 houses, all built in the 1950s, all painted in those soft low country colors, pale yellow, Carolina blue, weathered seafoam, American flags on every other porch, a basketball hoop at number 7, a swing set at number 4. The street ended in a cul-de-sac shaded by live oaks so old and so wide their branches had grown together overhead, like hands folded in prayer. In the mornings, you'd hear sprinklers clicking on at 6:15, one by one down the block like a countdown. The newspaper hit each driveway at 6:18. By 6:30, old Mr. Harding at the corner was walking his basset hound. And by 7:00, the sound every kid on Magnolia Lane grew up hearing, the soft thunk, thunk, thunk of an old man splitting firewood behind the house at number 5. That was Raymond's house. Baby blue shutters, a deep front porch with 2 rocking chairs, even though only one of them had been used since 2015. A weathered flagpole planted in the front yard, Old Glory on top, and underneath, a dark navy flag with a trident stitched in gold. A small bronze plaque at the base of a massive white oak in the front yard, half covered in ivy, read, Heritage Tree 47, Charleston County Registry, planted 1924. Remember that plaque, folks, we're gonna come back to it. Master Chief Petty Officer Raymond Alexander Callahan, United States Navy, retired. 75 years old in the spring of 2019. 6'1", gray hair cropped so close you could see the scars on his scalp, forearms like rope, blue eyes so pale they looked almost silver when the light hit them right. Ray enlisted in the Navy on September 3, 1968, 3 weeks after his older brother came home from Vietnam in a flag-draped box. By 1970, he'd earned his Trident SEAL Team 2, based out of Little Creek, Virginia. He served 26 years. Vietnam, Cold War operations he still to this day will not discuss. Grenada in '83, Panama in '89, the Gulf in '91. He retired in 1994 with a Bronze Star with Combat V, 2 Silver Stars, 3 Purple Hearts, and a closet full of medals his grandchildren had never seen. He never talked about any of it. Ray married his high school sweetheart, Margaret, in 1971 between deployments. They had one daughter, Sarah, who grew up to be a federal prosecutor. Margaret passed from pancreatic cancer in the winter of 2015. Ray buried her under the white oak in the front yard, or rather, he buried a small brass urn of her ashes there, right beside the root where she used to sit reading her mystery novels. The oak you see had been planted by Ray's grandfather, a cotton farmer named Eli Callahan, in the spring of 1924, the year the house was built. 5 generations of Callahans had grown up climbing that tree. Ray's father had carved his initials into the bark as a boy. So had Ray, so had his daughter. So had his granddaughter Emma, now 28 years old and clerking for a federal district judge in Columbia. Ray lived quietly, woke at 5. Black coffee, black, always black, walked his 9-year-old border collie, Gunny, twice a day, spent his afternoons in the workshop behind the house building children's rocking horses he donated to the local VA hospital every Christmas. He had one best friend left from the teams. A man named Marcus Dupree, a former SEAL who'd gone to law school on the GI Bill and was now a senior partner at one of the most feared environmental litigation firms in the Southeast. You'll hear that name again, too. Raymond Callahan was the kind of man who still stood up when a woman walked into a room, still removed his hat at the dinner table, still saluted the flag when it passed in a parade, even if no one was watching. He had one wound that never quite healed, a slight limp in his left leg from a piece of shrapnel he took in 1983 that the doctors decided wasn't worth the risk of removing. On cold mornings he walked slower, that was all. The house next door, number 7 Magnolia Lane, went up for sale in February 2019 when the old widow who'd lived there for 40 years passed away peacefully in her sleep. It sold in 9 days, cash offer, $400,000 over asking. The moving truck rolled in on a Saturday morning in late March. Ray was on his porch with his coffee when he saw it, a massive, matte black 2020 Porsche Cayenne Turbo pulling up behind the truck, followed by a white Tesla Model X Plaid with custom rims. Out of the Porsche stepped a man in his early 40s, 6 feet tall, dark hair slicked back, a Patagonia vest over a crisp white t-shirt, AirPods in, speaking loudly into his phone. No, Singapore can wait. I'm at the house, Derek the house, call me in an hour. His name was Brennan Whitfield. 42 years old, Stanford MBA, class of 2007, CEO and co-founder of a fintech startup called Nexipay, headquartered in a glass tower in downtown Charleston. Net worth, on paper, at least somewhere north of $60 million. Out of the Tesla stepped his wife, Ashley, 34, blonde, sunglasses the size of saucers, already filming a TikTok of the house for her 180,000 followers. 2 kids, a boy and a girl, ran ahead screaming. The movers were still unloading when Brennan Whitfield looked across the fence line, saw Ray sitting quietly on his porch, saw the American flag, saw the old pickup in the driveway, a 1987 Ford F-150, immaculate, Ray's pride and joy, and made a face. He actually made a face. Then he said, just loud enough for Ray to hear, to one of his movers, "Christ, I didn't realize we were moving into a retirement community." And that's when Ray Callahan knew. You see, folks, after 26 years in the teams, after a lifetime of reading men in the worst places on earth, Ray had developed an instinct. He called it the tell. Every dangerous man, he used to say, tells you exactly who he is in the first 30 seconds. All you have to do is listen. Brennan Whitfield had just told him. 3 weeks later, on a warm Tuesday afternoon in April, Ray was on his knees in the garden, pulling weeds from Margaret's rose bed, when he heard the gate bang open behind him. He didn't turn around right away. He finished the row he was on, stood up slowly, wiped his hands on a rag, and only then did he look at the man standing in his yard. "Mr. Callahan," Brennan Whitfield didn't offer a handshake. "We need to talk about your tree." Ray nodded politely. "Afternoon, come on up to the porch, I got fresh coffee." "I don't drink coffee after noon." "Listen, your tree is dropping leaves into my pool, and branches, it's a liability. I need you to cut it down." Ray blinked once, slow. "That tree's been there since 1924, son. I don't care when it was planted, it's affecting my property value. My pool guy is charging me extra. My wife is finding acorns in the filter. Cut it down or I'm calling the HOA." Ray studied him for a long moment, the way a man might study a snake he hadn't decided to kill yet. "Mr. Whitfield, that oak is a registered heritage tree under Charleston County Ordinance 7814. I couldn't cut it down even if I wanted to, and I don't want to. My grandfather planted it. My wife's ashes are buried under it." Brennan Whitfield smirked. He actually smirked. "Yes, well, I've got a lawyer, and I bet my lawyer is better than your lawyer." Ray smiled just barely. "I bet you're right." "Good, so we understand each other." "No, sir, I don't believe we do." Ray took one step closer, not threatening, just close enough that Brennan Whitfield could see his eyes. "Son, I spent 26 years in places you can't find on a map, serving people you'll never meet. I came home. I buried my wife under that tree, and I'm asking you, politely, man to man, neighbor to neighbor, leave it alone." Brennan Whitfield laughed. "Listen, old man, this isn't your little army base anymore. This is my neighborhood now, and things are gonna change around here." Then he turned and walked out the gate, letting it slam behind him. Direct hit. Let me pause here and ask you something. Have you ever tried to be reasonable with someone who has absolutely no interest in being reasonable? A boss, a neighbor, a relative, someone who mistook your patience for weakness? Drop a comment below and tell me about the most unreasonable person you ever had to deal with. I read every single one. And stick around, folks, because what this man just did in the next 6 weeks is going to make your blood boil. The first call to the sheriff came on a Thursday. Brennan Whitfield reported Ray's dog, Gunny, as aggressive and barking constantly. A deputy named Jim Holloway, whose father incidentally had served with Ray on the VFW board for 15 years, showed up, apologized, and left without filing a report. The second call came 4 days later. This time it was noise, Ray's woodworking shop, at 2 in the afternoon on a weekday. Deputy Holloway came back, apologized again, and had a quiet word with Brennan Whitfield about filing frivolous complaints. That didn't stop him. The HOA complaints started next. 11 in 6 weeks. Ray's flagpole was too tall, his truck was an eyesore, his gutters were overflowing, his mailbox was non-conforming. Every single complaint was dismissed because every single complaint was a lie. But the real damage started in May. On a rainy Monday, Ray came out to find his Ford F-150 keyed from headlight to tail light. A long, deep gouge in the driver's side door. No witnesses, no cameras caught it, or so Brennan Whitfield thought. Because here's what nobody knew at the time. In the fall of 2018, 6 months before the Whitfields moved in, Ray's daughter Sarah, the federal prosecutor, had given him a security system for his birthday. 4K ultra-high-definition cameras mounted discreetly under the eaves, 30-day cloud backup, motion-activated, night vision. And every camera had a clean, clear, unobstructed view of the property line. Ray didn't mention them, not once. He just watched the footage that Sunday night, sipping his coffee, as Brennan Whitfield, at 11:47 p.m. on a Sunday, dragged a key down the entire length of his truck. Ray saved the file, labeled it, filed it, and went to bed. Next came the pool chemicals. Brennan Whitfield dumped a jug of industrial-grade chlorine into Margaret's rose bed one weekend when Ray was in Charleston visiting his daughter. 47 roses, all of them dead within 5 days. The ground had to be remediated. Ray documented every dead bloom, every dollar of damage, every text message, every email to the HOA, every deputy report. He kept a notebook, black leather, the kind Navy officers used to carry. He wrote in it every night with a fountain pen Margaret had given him for their 25th anniversary. Dates, times, incidents, witnesses. Direct hit. Now let me ask you something. How many of you have learned the hard way that the smartest thing you can ever do when someone is tormenting you is write it all down, document everything? Because here's the thing, folks, the loud ones talk, the dangerous ones take notes. And Ray Callahan was taking very, very careful notes. By the end of June 2019, he had a 200-page file. Photographs, videos, timestamps, police reports, HOA complaint records, veterinary bills from the time Gunny mysteriously got sick after drinking from a puddle in the front yard, a puddle that tested positive for antifreeze. That was the one that almost broke him. Almost. On Monday, July 15, 2019, Ray got a call from his daughter Sarah. His granddaughter Emma was getting engaged. Sarah wanted him to drive up to Columbia for the weekend, 3 days, 4 nights, to meet the young man and celebrate with the family. Ray hadn't been out of Willow Creek for more than an overnight since Margaret died, but Emma was his only grandchild, and Margaret would have wanted him there. So he packed a bag, loaded Gunny into the truck, double-checked his camera system, and headed north on Interstate 26 on a Wednesday morning, telling his neighbor across the street, a retired schoolteacher named Miss Abigail, to please keep an eye on the house. He came home on Sunday afternoon, July 21, 2019. It was a hot, still day, 94 degrees, the sky the color of old denim. Gunny was asleep in the passenger seat. Ray was humming along to an old Hank Williams song. He turned onto Magnolia Lane. And he stopped the truck. In the middle of the street. because the sky over his front yard was wrong. For 95 years, there had been a green cathedral there, a sprawling canopy of white oak that shaded half the cul-de-sac. Ray's entire horizon, every morning of his life, had been framed by that tree. It was gone. In its place, a raw, flat blue sky and a stump. A stump so wide you could have parked a car on it. Ray stepped out of the truck slowly, left the door open, left Gunny in the passenger seat, walked across the yard. Brennan Whitfield was standing in his driveway in that same white bathrobe, holding that same cup of espresso. A woodchipper was still running. 2 men in orange vests were feeding it branches. Ray stopped at the edge of the stump, looked down. Margaret's urn was still there, still buried, safe. He could see the corner of the brass through the disturbed soil. The bronze plaque, Heritage Tree 47, Charleston County Registry, planted 1924, lay face down in the dirt, covered in sawdust. On the lowest remaining ring of the stump, carved into the bark 72 years earlier by a barefoot boy named Raymond Callahan, were the initials RC and the date 1947. They were cut in half by a chainsaw. Ray didn't say a word. He didn't shake, he didn't curse, he didn't cry. He just looked up across the fence at Brennan Whitfield. Whitfield smiled and said, "Property survey came back. Turns out half that tree was on my side, so I exercised my right to abate a nuisance. Checks in the mail for the other half. Generous of me, really. Call it $400 for firewood. Welcome to the 21st century, old man." It was a lie, all of it. The tree was 100% on Ray's property. The survey was fabricated, and there was no check. But Ray didn't argue. He reached down, picked up the single acorn that had fallen beside his boot, slipped it into his shirt pocket, and walked back inside his house. Direct hit now. If you think Raymond Callahan is going to let this go, you haven't been paying attention. You've never met a man like Ray. You've never served with a man like Ray. And Brennan Whitfield, God help him, is about to find out exactly what kind of man he picked a fight with. Because here's what nobody on Magnolia Lane knew, least of all Brennan Whitfield, about the quiet old man next door. That Sunday night, Ray Callahan poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon, the first drink he'd had since Margaret's funeral, and he made 3 phone calls. The first call was to his daughter, Sarah, the federal prosecutor. The second call was to his granddaughter, Emma, who happened to clerk for the Honorable Judge Warren Holloway of the United States District Court for the District of South Carolina. The third call, the one that mattered most, was to an old teammate. Marcus Dupree had served beside Ray in SEAL Team 2 from 1978 to 1989. He'd taken a round through the shoulder in Panama that Ray had plugged with his thumb for 47 minutes until the medevac arrived. When Marcus got out, he went to the Citadel, then to Duke Law, then built one of the most feared environmental and property rights litigation firms in the Southeast, Dupree, Hargrove & Bass, with offices in Charleston, Atlanta, and Raleigh. Marcus answered on the second ring. "Ray, it's been a while." "Marcus, I need a favor." "Anything." "Somebody cut down Grandity's oak." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Marcus Dupree had been to Ray's house. He had sat under that tree. He had helped bury Margaret's urn beneath it in the winter of 2015. "Ray, tell me everything." And Ray did. Here's what nobody knew at the time, what Brennan Whitfield, in all his Stanford MBA arrogance, had never bothered to check. That oak tree wasn't just a tree. It was, under Charleston County Ordinance 7814, a designated heritage tree, meaning the unauthorized removal of it carried a mandatory statutory fine of $150,000 per tree. But it got worse. Under South Carolina Code Section 1611-615, the unauthorized cutting of timber on another person's property is a crime known as timber trespass, and the statute allows for triple damages for the fair market replacement value of the tree. A 95-year-old white oak, properly appraised as a specimen shade tree with a trunk diameter of 44 inches, carried a fair market replacement value of, and I am not making this number up, $312,000. Tripled, that's $936,000. But it got worse than that. Because Ray's cameras, his daughter's birthday present from 2018, had captured every second of the cutting. And in the footage, clear as daylight, you could see an active osprey nest in one of the upper branches. An osprey nest with 2 juvenile birds in it that tumbled out when the branch fell. Ospreys are a federally protected species under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918. That's a federal crime, folks, carrying fines of up to $15,000 per bird per violation and up to 6 months in federal prison. And it got even worse than that. Because the tree service Brennan Whitfield had hired, a sketchy outfit based out of North Charleston, had never filed a permit application, never checked the county heritage tree registry, never pulled a survey, never confirmed ownership. They became co-defendants the moment their chainsaws touched that trunk. And the survey Brennan Whitfield claimed he had, it didn't exist, he'd made it up, which became, the moment he put it in writing in an email to the HOA 3 days later, a clear case of fraud. Marcus Dupree listened to all of this, asked Ray to forward the files, and said very quietly, "Ray, this man is going to be a cautionary tale by Christmas." And then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Also, you know his company Nexapay? I know a guy at the SEC field office in Atlanta. That name has been crossing a lot of desks lately. Not my fight, but I'd bet you a steak dinner it will be somebody's fight soon enough." Ray hung up the phone, finished his bourbon, wrote one line in his leather notebook. "Patience is a weapon." Then he went to bed. It happened on a Tuesday morning, September 24th, 2019. The sky over Willow Creek was a brilliant, cloudless blue, the kind of sky that makes old sailors miss the ocean. A mild breeze was carrying the smell of late-blooming magnolia up Magnolia Lane. At 8:47 a.m., Brennan Whitfield stepped out of his front door in a white bathrobe, barefoot, holding a small espresso cup, and stopped. Because parked along the curb of his cul-de-sac, blocking his Porsche, were 6 vehicles. 2 Charleston County Sheriff's Cruisers. 1 Charleston County Code Enforcement SUV. 1 unmarked gray Chevy Tahoe belonging to the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. 1 black sedan from the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. And 1 battered white news van from the local ABC affiliate, because a 95-year-old heritage tree getting illegally cut down in Charleston County was, as it turned out, the exact kind of local story that became a regional story. Brennan Whitfield's espresso cup fell out of his hand and shattered on the driveway. A woman in a dark blue suit walked up to him first. She was carrying a thick manila envelope. "Mr. Brennan Whitfield." "Yeah." She placed the envelope in his hands. "You've been served." The next 3 hours, as later documented in the Charleston Post and Courier, went like this. A deputy read him the criminal citation for violation of Charleston County Ordinance 7814, 1 count, statutory minimum fine of $150,000. A federal wildlife officer read him the citation for violation of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, 2 counts, 1 per dead osprey chick, carrying combined civil penalties of $30,000 and potential criminal referral to the U.S. Attorney's Office. A process server handed him the civil complaint. Callahan v. Whitfield et al. 26 counts, trespass, timber trespass, triple damages, destruction of property, intentional infliction of emotional distress, trespass to chattels, the rose bed, malicious injury to personal property, the truck, fraud, civil conspiracy, nuisance, and the one that would stink the most, violation of a federally recognized memorial site because Margaret's urn had been disturbed by the falling branches. Total damages sought $2,400,000. $2.4 million. The tree service company Palmetto Tree and Stump, LLC, was a co-defendant, along with its owner personally. They declared bankruptcy within 6 weeks. The news cameras were rolling when Brennan Whitfield, still in his bathrobe, still barefoot, still holding the shattered remains of an espresso cup, tried to turn and go back inside his house. A second process server stopped him. "Sir, one more." Another envelope, A temporary restraining order filed that morning by Ray Callahan's attorney restricting Brennan Whitfield from coming within 20 feet of the property line. And then, as if on cue, and I am not making this up, a sixth vehicle pulled up. A nondescript black Suburban. 2 men in dark suits got out. They weren't there for the tree. They were there from the Charleston field office of the Securities and Exchange Commission, with a subpoena and a request for a voluntary interview regarding irregularities in Nexapay's 2018 and 2019 investor disclosures. That subpoena and what came out of it is a story for another day. Across the cul-de-sac in a rocking chair on a front porch sat a 75-year-old man in a gray flannel shirt holding a cup of black coffee, one hand resting on the head of a border collie. He didn't watch. He didn't smile. He just sipped his coffee, looked out at the blue sky where his oak tree used to stand, and very quietly said to the dog, "Margaret would have liked this Tuesday." The street went very, very quiet. Miss Abigail, the retired schoolteacher across the way, came out on her porch and stood with her arms folded, watching. The Hendersons at number 3 stepped out. The Parkers at number 9. Old Mr. Harding walked up the block with his basset hound and stopped at the edge of the driveway, saying nothing. 9 houses on Magnolia Lane, 8 porches occupied. 1 man standing alone on his front lawn in a bathrobe, holding a stack of paperwork he didn't understand yet while news cameras filmed him. Ashley Whitfield came out once, saw the cameras, went back in. She deleted her Instagram account that afternoon. The TRO meant Brennan Whitfield couldn't even come close to the property line, couldn't argue, couldn't apologize, couldn't do anything but stand there. Within 3 weeks, a for sale sign appeared in the yard at number 7. Within 6 weeks, the price had been cut twice. Within 8 weeks, a moving truck arrived on a gray, drizzling Saturday morning in November. Ashley Whitfield left first in the Tesla with the 2 kids. Brennan Whitfield left last, alone, in an Uber because the Porsche had been repossessed. Nobody on Magnolia Lane came outside to wave goodbye. Direct hit. Let me ask you something, folks. Have you ever watched someone who bullied and belittled you for months get their whole world turned upside down in a single morning? It's a feeling I can't quite describe. Some people call it schadenfreude. Some people call it karma. Raymond Callahan called it in his quiet way the natural order reasserting itself. And that's exactly what it was, because here's the truth, folks. The universe keeps a ledger, and every entry gets balanced, eventually. 3 years passed. The civil case, Callahan v. Whitfield, settled in May of 2020 for the full amount, $2,400,000. Brennan Whitfield's lawyers, after seeing the footage and the heritage tree designation, advised him to settle. He couldn't pay. He liquidated his Nexapay stock, which by then had collapsed anyway. The SEC investigation ended with Brennan Whitfield pleading guilty in federal court in the summer of 2021 to 2 counts of securities fraud. He served 14 months at a federal facility in Montgomery, Alabama. His wife filed for divorce while he was still inside. Palmetto Tree and Stump went out of business. The owner lost his house. Ray Callahan did 3 things with the settlement money. He donated $1 million to the Wounded Warrior Project in Margaret's name. He donated $500,000 to the Charleston County Heritage Tree Fund to protect other old trees on other old streets from other arrogant men. And with the rest, he did something small. He hired an arborist to carefully excavate the original stump and preserve it, had the wood dried and cured. Then he spent 18 months in his workshop behind the house, crafting, by hand, 3 matching rocking chairs from the oldest wood of the original tree. 1 for his porch, 1 for Sarah, 1 for Emma. In the spring of 2021, he planted 3 new white oak saplings in the front yard in a perfect triangle around the old stump. His granddaughter Emma, now married, now pregnant, pressed an acorn into the soil next to each one. The same acorn her great-great-grandfather had planted from 97 years earlier. In the summer of 2022, a young couple moved into number 7. A United States Marine Corps Staff Sergeant named Dominic Rivera, home from 2 deployments in Afghanistan, and his wife Lena, a pediatric nurse, and their little boy, who was 3 years old and named, of all things, Oakley. The first Saturday they were there, Staff Sergeant Rivera walked over to Ray's porch with a 6-pack of cold beer, shook his hand and said, "Sir, I heard what happened. It's an honor. Ray smiled, offered him a chair, offered him the rocker made from the original tree. And for the first time since Margaret died, the second rocker on Ray Callahan's porch had someone sitting in it. They sat there for 3 hours that evening, not saying much, watching the sun go down, watching little Oakley Rivera chase fireflies across the cul-de-sac. The 3 saplings swayed in the breeze. Old Gunny, now 12 years old and gray around the muzzle, thumped his tail once in the grass. And somewhere deep in the earth under all of it, Margaret Callahan's ashes rested undisturbed, exactly where they had always been. Let me tell you what Ray Callahan told his granddaughter Emma the night her son was born, the summer of 2022, holding that tiny boy in a hospital room in Charleston. He said, "Emma, you're gonna meet a lot of men in this world. Some of them are gonna be loud, some of them are gonna have money. Some of them are gonna think the rules were written for other people. Pay them no mind. Because honey, the quietest man in the room is almost always the most dangerous one. And the man who has nothing left to prove is the man you should never ever test." You see, folks, Brennan Whitfield made one mistake. It wasn't the tree. It wasn't the lies. It wasn't the fraud. It was an older, simpler mistake, the oldest mistake in the book. He looked at a 75-year-old man in a flannel shirt, sipping black coffee on a front porch in South Carolina, and he saw someone weak. He didn't see the trident. He didn't see the silver stars. He didn't see the 26 years. He didn't see the 95-year-old oak or the daughter who was a federal prosecutor or the granddaughter who clerked for a federal judge or the best friend who ran one of the most feared law firms in the Southeast. He saw an old man. And that, my friends, is the oldest lesson there is. Never mistake a quiet man for a weak man. Never mistake patience for permission. And never ever, not in this life or the next, pick a fight with a veteran who has nothing left to lose but his honor. Ray Callahan is 81 years old now. He still wakes at 5, still drinks his coffee black, still walks Gunny twice a day, slower than he used to, but every day without fail. The 3 oaks are 15 feet tall now. By the time little Oakley Rivera is old enough to climb one, they'll be tall enough to hold him. And somewhere in a small glass jar on Ray Callahan's mantle, next to a framed photograph of a woman with kind eyes and gray hair, sits a single acorn. The one he picked up all those years ago, on the worst day of his life. The seed of everything that grew back.